Let's start at the quarterback spot. I know I expressed some concerns about the Cardinals offense earlier in the show, but you're feeling okay about Kyler Murray this week, huh?
Well, they're playing the Jets, so I think that goes without saying that we can pretty much go ahead and start him this week. The Jets have allowed 7 touchdown passes to quarterbacks this season. That's the 8th most in the NFL, so perhaps they won't have to rely on Kyler Murray so much to run the football, but when he does, he is the best in the NFL at doing that. He's had an average of 66.3 rushing yards per game this season, and he scored at least 21 fantasy points per game this season, so that's a pretty easy one. Let's get a little bit more difficult. Let's talk about Teddy Bridgewater, who is the QB 21 heading into this week, but had a great week last week. Again, I'm saying the word week too much. How about Teddy Bridgewater going up against the Falcons? 26 fantasy points last week. Again, God, why am I still saying that word? Stop it, Rank. Against the Cardinals. The Falcons have allowed an average of right around 33 fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. That's the most in the NFL. So if your quarterback has been struggling, or you had Aaron Rodgers, or even Matthew Stafford, whatever, go pick up Teddy Bridgewater for this week.
I like the Bridgewater pick. I said before the season, he's a streaming option in most leagues, and this is the opportunity to get him in and stream him, especially if you are missing, say, Aaron Rodgers coming up in week 5. All right, at running back, we talked about Kenyan Drake and how frustrating it is. Do you believe this, or are you just trying to speak it into existence? Because either way, I'm totally down with him, having a big week this week.
Little column A, little of column B. It is, but again, I mean, the big game is going to happen. I think that a lot of people had given up on Kenyan Drake last season when he was traded from the Miami Dolphins to the 49ers, and I remember a lot of people were not starting him. The only person I know in my life, Candace Patton from The Flash, she had him in our fantasy league 1, and she's like, I'm going with Kenyan Drake. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you got to follow your gut. He had a monster game. And so I do trust him this week against the Jets. And I do like Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week as well, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, who've given up the most fantasy points to running backs this season. We saw last week that everybody was in on Devin Singletary. So for me, it just makes sense to go back to Clyde Edwards. Just go ahead and give him an opportunity. I really do believe that this could be a game where the Chiefs kind of just wear them down through the run. And you're talking about speaking things into existence. I have to go up against Patrick Mahomes in a league this week. So I'm hoping that it's going to be a heavy dose of Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I know that after that first week, I think people have been sort of disappointed by Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I'm starting to think that maybe we were expecting too much of him. I don't think he's been bad. I just think that people just were expecting him to come in there and like it was going to be Jamal Charles sort of reincarnated in the Chiefs offense. And I think that's sort of unfair, but he's been fine. I just think that maybe our expectations were a little bit too high for him. Wide receiver. Look, I know Justin Jefferson has been a nice player the last couple of weeks, but this passing game still runs through Adam Thielen there for the Vikings, right?
Oh, certainly. And you've got to start him this week going up against the Seattle Seahawks. Again, a team that has given up a lot of production through the air. And it's funny how quickly the NFL moves, because a couple of years ago, a game between the Vikings and the Seahawks would have been a defensive battle. Should we start any of these guys? Should we be worried about any of our superstars? But now we have no hesitation. Adam has 4 receiving touchdowns on the season. That's tied for the second most in the NFL. And of course, the Seahawks have allowed the most fantasy points per game to the wideout. So I think Adam's a good start, and Justin Jefferson is also a really good start as well. And I'm going to go with CeeDee Lamb as another one of my starts this week going up against the New York Giants. He is one of 3 players in the league who's had at least 5 receptions and 50 yards in every game this season, 17 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3. And if this was professional wrestling and the Cowboys receivers were a trio with Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup would be planning the heel turn out of jealousy that CeeDee Lamb has been so good this year that he would just whop him with a metal folding chair, become a huge heel. CeeDee Lamb would be one of the most over faces in the NFL. So I think that he's a safe play each and every week.
I am getting to the point where I'm almost giving up on Michael Gallup. He had the one big game, but beyond that, it has been Amari Cooper. It's been CeeDee Lamb. It's been Dalton Schultz. And Michael Gallup is getting really, really hard to trust now, which It's sad because I thought Michael Gallup was set up for a big year, but it doesn't seem to be happening.
And it's crazy to me, too, because we talked about this coming into the season. There were 177 targets left from Jason Witten being gone and from Randall Cobb being gone. And where have they gone? And the Cowboys throw the ball a lot. It seems impossible that Michael Gallup is not more involved.
Yeah, I can't figure it out, but this has been the case through 4 weeks. I just don't know. Tight end, I feel like, George Kittle, and I know people are going to look at that and say, well, of course, but I don't know. I feel like every now and then you just have to remind people to start some of these star guys and not worry about matchups and that sort of thing.
I just want to sometimes talk about my favorite players in the NFL, and George Kittle is definitely one of those guys. He's a huge wrestling mark like me. We chat on the social media. He's really nice to me, even though I picked the 49ers to go 3-13. He still gives me time and he's cool with me. And so I think that what he did on Sunday night was one of the most impressive things that I've seen. 15 targets, 15 receptions. It's impossible to go out there and be this good. And he plays with such aggression that you can't help but love the guy. And I kind of like Hunter Henry this week. I know that I feel like Hunter Henry's been good. Like, he's a good player, but it's a lot like when you go to a sushi restaurant and you order sashimi, which is fine, but you're like, this is it? Like, I'm paying a lot of money and it's just one sliver. Like, it doesn't seem like enough because he's currently the tight end 16 on the season, but you see right there, at least 10 fantasy points in 3 out of 4 games. So I feel confident enough, especially in this matchup. The Saints have allowed a top 8 tight end in every game this season. So I think that Monday night you can sit there and feel comfortable with Hunter Henry. And you know what? I'm starting Justin Herbert. I replaced him with an Aaron Rodgers on a bye this week. So I'm getting spicy.
I like that. I definitely like that. Defense. This is simple, right? We're just picking on the Jets, especially now that we know Joe Flacco's quarterbacking. This seems like a pretty easy call here.
Yeah, the Cardinals it's pretty easy. And I think what the point, obviously, the Cardinals, you're going up against the Jets, you're going up against Joe Flacco. One of the things that you need to do is start looking ahead at like who is playing the Jets in the future and start those teams and start those guys. And you got to start pre-planning and maybe carrying them, because last week I went out and picked up the Cardinals in a lot of spots. Now, next week, they've got it's more difficult because they have one of the defenses that's already been picked up. So you might want to go with them. And then I also like the Kansas City Chiefs this week. No, I'm sorry. The New England Patriots. I'm sorry. I saw that video come up. I'm like, I like the Chiefs. I almost used a waiver claim on them this week, but I do like the Patriots going up against a inexperienced quarterback. They've had a lot of injuries. Cortland Sutton obviously is out. So there's an opportunity to go out there. And it's just impressive to me to watch this Patriots defense, because in week 1, I remember saying something like, they've allowed only 1 rushing touchdown since the start of 2019. And obviously some kid on Twitter is like, oh, it's a different team now. And I'm like, okay, if there is one team in the NFL where it seems like it doesn't matter who is in the helmet, as long as they're just on that field, they're always good, it's the New England Patriots. And I watched that game again, and I was extremely impressed with how well that Patriots defense plays. And they've lost so many guys over the last couple of years, and they just keep doing it over and over again. So if the Patriots are available for you, and a lot of people might have dropped them because they were playing the Kansas City Chiefs, go see if they're available and go pick them up.
Bill Belichick he's just solved football. I think there's no other way really to explain it. So there you go. That was Secure Starts presented by Visa. All right, quickly go through some of your sits at quarterback. You are looking more not for Ryan Fitzpatrick this week.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense going up against the San Francisco 49ers. And even though Bosa's out and they've lost some other players of note, they're starting to get a little bit healthy. I think Richard Sherman at some point will be back. But the 49ers have allowed the second fewest fantasy or yards per game to quarterbacks this season. And Fitzmagic, it's that time of the year when, the magic's starting to run out. Like it's like going to see a real magic show and being like, oh, I see the wire. And it's just time. So we're going to leave him on the bench for the next 2 weeks. So we got Denver next week. And Baker Mayfield against the Indianapolis Colts. And again, I want to reiterate this. I don't believe that Baker is a bad quarterback. I like Baker Mayfield. I don't think that I think he gets too much criticism, but I will say that this matchup against the Colts is very tough. They did a nice job against the Chicago Bears last week. And in fact, they've allowed the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. They have not allowed, on average, to get more than double-digit fantasy points. And so I'm avoiding. I think this is an easy avoid, and I think it also trickles down to Odell Beckham Jr., who was very good, obviously, on Sunday, but now you got to kind of avoid him this week.
Running back, who are you looking at putting on the bench this week in the backfield?
I know a lot of you probably picked up Joshua Kelly, or you've had him on the bench or anything like that. I'm still going to wait another week. I'm not sure that I'm going to rush him in to my lineup. I know that he really hasn't taken advantage of the opportunities. I know a lot of people were hyper on him going into that Carolina match, and he just didn't perform. And now he's put the rock on the ground in a couple of games, in a couple of key spots too. That fumble, I'm not sure whose fault it was. It was him or it was Justin at the end of the first half last week against Tampa Bay, but it stands out to me. I'm going to put it on the running back. You got to secure that football. So that's the kind of thing that gets you off the field. And I'm looking at Myles Gaskin, who is a player that I advocated to pick up off the waiver wire last week, was hopeful that he was going to do better against Seattle. I know Seattle's tough against the run, so I'm not completely discouraged. But even though he has become the guy who is getting all the production for the Miami Dolphins, he still hasn't topped 15 fantasy points in a game this season. I do believe at some point it's going to happen. He's worth rostering. Don't get rid of him. I'm just not playing him this week.
Wide receiver. We talked about the Rams maybe not having a great week. Robert Woods is sort of a guy to avoid, huh?
Yeah, we've seen Cooper Kupp over the last 2 weeks out-target him 17-13. It's not a significant difference, but I've seen more production from Cooper Kupp. And you know what? This isn't a great matchup either for him. I mean, Washington has allowed just one top 30 wide receiver this season. Trees has scored fewer than 40 scrimmage yards, or has attained, rushed for, combined, whatever, accumulated less than 40 scrimmage yards in 2 of his last 3 games. I do know they get very creative near the goal line, but we saw Gerald Everett get a play that I thought would have been designed for Bobby here, but unfortunately it didn't go his way. They do run the jet sweeps. I mean, that's an automatic. I mean, listen, you come to LA, you get an In-N-Out burger, you go see the Hollywood sign, and you go see a jet sweep run by Bobby Trees. And I'm also going to avoid Jerry Jeudy against the New England Patriots. He's had fewer than 65 receiving yards in every game this season. The Broncos offense has not been playing very well. They've had fewer, they've had on average 20.5 points per game. That's the 5th fewest in the NFL. They're averaging just over 300 yards per game, which is the 4th fewest in the NFL. So you really need him to be touchdown dependent. So I'm going to avoid him in this situation.
And then at the tight end spot, who are we looking at sitting on the bench this week?
Who are we looking at? It's Mike Gesicki. I think it's going to be one of them that I'm going to avoid this week. Is that who I'm supposed to lead off with? I should put. Okay, good. I was hopeful.
Correct.
I was hopeful. We saw last week. You know, it's funny because Patrick Claybon and I talked about this on one of I think it was Friday's NFL Fantasy Live, where I was like, "Don't play Zach Ertz," and he was like, "No, give Zach Ertz a chance because the 49ers FPA might be a little bit skewed because the tight ends that they've played have not been great," which was a fair point. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But now we've seen them shut down Zach Ertz, so I think now we can just come out and proclaim that the 49ers are good against opposing tight ends. Did I have one or two on this one? I know I feel very, very prepared right here. But
I think there's a second one, right? Kyle Rudolph, right?
Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry. My computer screen has gone completely blank. But yeah, you know, Kyle Rudolph it's tough to find these tight ends that I'm really avoiding because there are some good matchups this week. But I think that the Seahawks, for as much production as they have given up to the wide receivers, they've done okay against the tight ends. And so to me, and I feel like Kirk Cousins is going to be as efficient as possible with the football. He's going to look to Adam Thielen. He's going to look to Justin Jefferson. And of course, he's going to probably go to Dalvin Cook. So I think that Kyle Rudolph's too far down the pecking order. And I know a lot of people might look at this and say, well, you know, wait, the Seahawks give up a lot of production. And I understand that, but they have been good against tight ends. So I would avoid Kyle Rudolph if possible.